Hello and welcome to episode 162 of the Colby Cast, your place for community and conversation about pop culture and storytelling. On this episode, I am joined by two special guests to get everyone ready for the newest Star Wars streaming series, debuting in a matter of hours on Disney+. Of course, I'm talking about The Acolyte. First up, I'm excited to welcome back to the show a good friend and even better person. He's Mr. Daft Prawn on the socials, but Mr. Franc Mulder in our hearts. The one and only Franc Mulder. Welcome back, Frank.
Thank you so much, Colby. It was really exciting to get an invite along to have another chat. It's been too long, so I'm very much looking forward to this bit of time on a Sunday afternoon.
You're absolutely right, Frank. I think we were just talking about this before we started recording. Last time we got to sit down and record it was about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So just think about how long that's been. Way too long. And thank you so much for coming on and having this chat. I'm looking forward to seeing all of our thoughts here on the Acolyte. But next up, to join us with those thoughts, making his Colby Cast debut, Star Wars superfan and unparalleled member of our podcasting community and co-creator of one of the most adorable human beings on earth, Daz Davies. Welcome to the Colby Cast, Daz.
Hello there. Oh, you're too kind, honestly. That's nice of you to say. I was going to try the Luke and Caleb coming on, but only Ross can do that any justice. It's legendary. I can't be driving if Ross is on at the moment with the when he starts out the show
with the monotone one syllable.
It's uncanny.
Well, that's why I consider him the fourth member of the Colby Cast, because he just knows how to greet me on the during the beginnings of episodes. But that hello there that you dropped, oh, that was beautiful. That I'm gonna have to clip that, and I may just use it in a future intro or something, and I can say I had Ewan McGregor on. Well, thank you guys both for coming on, and I'm excited to talk about The Acolyte. Of course, hey, big surprise, right? A Star Wars fan that's excited to talk about Star Wars with other Star Wars fans. What a shocker. But it was a little bit of a short notice for both of you, because I sort of took a swing and said, you know what, I'm going to extend an invite to these wonderful gentlemen. And it worked out. We're on 2 different continents, 3 different time zones. And, it just made me think about the power of modern technology and how wonderful podcasting and the internet and all this stuff is, because this friendship that we're here having a discussion across these 3 different time zones wouldn't be possible without that kind of stuff. And, this is just sort of coming out of nowhere, but you guys are both very experienced podcast listeners and part of the podcasting community. I'm curious, how has that dynamic, listening to podcasts and being on podcasts, how has that affected your life really and your fandom with Star Wars and other things like Marvel and other things that are interesting to you?
You go, Frank.
Oh, okay, sure. I didn't want to just step on in. Mostly it's just been the connections that this community has made, whether it be trips across the country or to celebration or just our online meetings, chats, conversations, sharings of all the exciting things that go on in the fandom and in our lives. I know Daz recently seems to be making some hugely impressive steps in his life. Didn't Daisy Ridley appear in your world at some point recently?
She did, unbelievably.
I mean, wow. I mean, but yeah, generally speaking, and very broadly speaking, the friendships, the connections, how it's opened our minds beyond how we think of the fandom, how we think about the stories, and also how open we are to hear things that are different to what we originally thought. So many times, because I typically listen while I'm driving back and forwards to work to podcasts, and the amount of times a penny has dropped, driving along, minding my own business, and suddenly, whether it be Colby, you, Caleb, or Luke, or whether I'm hearing Dan or Tom Gross, or it's Greg, Cass and McLaughlin, something comes up. It's like, why was that not something that came up to my mind when it was so, blindingly obvious? So, the friendships are top my list.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to work the word community into, that little tagline that I throw in there all the time. Your place for community. That's the one thing that I walked away from and found to be most special to me when I started to get to know people through Coffee with Kenobi and Dan, and who I got to know both of you guys because of Coffee with Kenobi, and then further along with Greg. Greg McLaughlin does such a great job at connecting people and heart and building friendships and community. And um, that's the thing that I appreciate most about this type of thing. Daz, how about you?
Yeah, it's amazing. You can put some headphones on, and suddenly you're surrounded by friends. Which is, it doesn't matter where you are, what time it is, what you're doing. You get this sort of shared experience with people that you care about, people who you probably have similar views to about the whatever's going on, the content, everything else. Just by the nature of pick and choosing what you like and what you don't like. For Star Wars, it's opened up the world for me really because I don't have any Star Wars friends really living around close to where I live. I would say 99.9% of my Star Wars friends living in the States, or at least on the other side of the Atlantic. It fills your world. The podcast community. There's always somebody there to sort of chat with you, to get excited with you. It's a great thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. I love I love the words that you chose. It fills your world. It really does. And it fills it with positivity and joy and fun and conversation, connections. It's just, and all through podcasting, and also the role that social media plays into it. Because I remember Coffee with Kenobi was really the first podcast that I began to interact with people. I'd listened to a couple other podcasts, a hockey related podcast, another one that was more a pop culture podcast, movies and whatnot. But that was just a podcast, something I listened to when a new episode would drop. But when I started listening to Dan, and I would hear people on his show, and then I would interact on social media, and then he would interact back. That was like my first step into a larger world, right? And I know that you guys have probably had very similar experiences. And then, you know, after we are done recording here, I'm going to put this out for the world to listen to, and people may have something to say, and they could say it on Threads, they could say it on X, they could say it on Facebook or Hive or any of the other ones that are out there, Instagram. And I just think that that's such an incredible dynamic. I've talked about my grandmother before, but my grandmother used to have pen pals. She would literally write, she would have lists of people sent to her, and she would choose, oh, I'm going to start writing to this person. And she would send stickers to people, to children. She wrote to prisoners. She wrote to people all over the world. And she created friendships and relationships with a lot of those people that went beyond pen pal. And I just sort of look at this as a modern version of that, right? We may be tweeting at each other or Instagramming at each other, but it's the same concept. We're sending thoughts, we're sending ourselves to other people, and they're sending themselves back to us. And it's just an incredible uh, dynamic, and one that I'm really enjoying sharing this dynamic of right here, talking to both of you guys. So thanks again for weighing in on that. And part of that is getting to know people, and something that I'm very curious about both of you, because I really don't know the answer to this question, is what was your experience with Star Wars at the beginning? How did you come to this fandom? How did you get interested in the movies, or maybe it was a TV show, or whatever it may have been? What was your entry point? What are your memories of this? And if you want to expand on that, where are you at now as a fan? Where did you start, and where are you now? Frank.
Yeah, so I was born in the early 70s. So I did get to see A New Hope, or just Star Wars as it was then. It was all I remember of it from back then is a trench run. I've mentioned this before. I remember being in the cinema. I remember the trench run. and not much beyond it. I do recall that the town I was from used to have a market. My first Star Wars toy I ever got was a 12-inch Luke Skywalker. I remember having that and playing with it in my back garden as a kid. Of course, I went through the rest of those movies as other people my age at the time, and then experienced the dark times. And as we came out of those with the special editions, I actually took my grandfather to see the special edition of Empire Strikes Back. I'm not sure what he thought of it, but it was an enjoyable, memorable event. And then, of course, out of nowhere came the prequels. I've loved everything all the way up to now. It doesn't mean there isn't problems, little details that are a little bit janky. But what I'm enjoying now, particularly, is the filling out of the stories, those gaps in timelines that really are, even to the casual viewer of like all these Disney Plus shows, you're starting to see connections that are solid. And of course, that's, I'm pretty sure, down to the types of Dave Filoni and all the other creative talents and minds, the story group and such, to keep everything on track and make everything cohesive. So right now, I'm in seventh heaven. It's coming from all directions all of the time. So I'll keep on taking it as long as it's coming.
I love it. I feel the same way. I'm right there with you. How about you, Daz?
Well, I was born slightly too late to see the original trilogy in the cinema. So Star Wars really was introduced to me on VHS. We had one tape shop, we called it, in the next village. It was a news agency, sort of newspapers, sweets and tobacco, things like that. But they also had a few shelves of videos, and they had one copy of various movies, and they did have the full trilogy. And I remember going down there, and you'd hope that they didn't have this little tab in which said they had been taken out, and you'd just be just furiously ruffling through them looking for one that didn't have that sticker on. And if you managed to get a Star Wars film, then you'd hit the jackpot. If you got more than one, then you're in heaven.
Incredible.
That was the next village, which a good Welsh name, one of the longest place names in the world. Llanfairpwll Gwyngyll Gogerich Chwyngrobwll Llantysilio Go Go Goch, or we shorten it to just Llanfair PG. But yeah, that was the next village, and we made lots of trips over there. Toys were a big part of me building my sort of love for Star Wars. Various odd figures, strange combinations that perhaps never cross paths in the movies. And yeah, playing with them in the bathtub and burying them in dirt in the back garden. But the time the prequels came out, it probably was the least ideal time for me maybe to pick it up. I just left high school, and I thought I was too cool for school maybe, and I saw all the movies in all the prequel movies in the cinema, and I remember enjoying them all. But at that time, I wouldn't say that I was particularly engaged. As a fan, just that, do you like Star Wars? Yes, I love it. But what's next? Then the sequel trilogy was, I would say, where my fandom just rocketed when The Force Awakens came out. I remember saying, what are these podcast things about? And I wonder if they have a Star Wars one. And Coffee with Kenobi pops up on the screen. I don't know what this is or how it works. I'll try it. And the rest is history, really. Listening in those early days of Coffee with Kenobi to Dan and Corey. It's just been a complete storm since then, really. I just got swept up by the community, loving it, loving every minute of being part of the community, and enjoying all the content that comes out as well. I think that since Disney's took over, I've just been lapping it up. It's one of those pinch yourselves. We're getting too much. This can't be right. So
too good to be true, right?
It's too good to be true. I really can't believe sometimes what we're getting. It's fantastic.
I love how you included in your history here the time that you sort of were in a lull with it, right? And it wasn't what it was early and what it is now. Mm-hmm. And just says to me, because I was the same way, I came to Star Wars like you, Daz, through VHS, but I don't ever remember seeing the first or the second in theaters. I just remember it always being on TV at home somehow. I remember memories. For some reason, I always loved when Han Solo turned around and told Luke, "Don't get cocky, kid," when they were when they're trying to escape, right? And Luke goes, "Woohoo!" and he goes, "Don't get cocky, kid." Always just stuck in my head. I remember being afraid of Yoda in the Dagobah scenes because I was very young watching those. But I do also remember having a wonderful set of Yoda underoos that I got for Christmas at one point. I think there's a picture of me I modeled in front of my whole family, the Yoda underoos. But then I have vivid memories of watching Return of the Jedi in theaters. So I was about 8 when it came out. Very, very, very vivid memories of that. But then, through the adolescent years, playing with toys, Daz, like you mentioned, I grew up and all the toys sort of went away and they were replaced by music and guitars and things that you get into in high school and cars and this and that. And then going through the 90s, the special editions come out and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I get to go see Star Wars in a theater. I don't care that it's something new, right? It's I get to go see it in a theater because I hadn't previously done that. And then the prequels came out, and I just sort of was all in on from the beginning. Like I was just happy that Star Wars was back. And Daz, this is what you made me think. My favorite author is C.S. Lewis, and in the I think it's the foreword to the original Chronicles of Narnia book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He writes that he wrote that for, I think it was his niece, that he began writing that story for his niece. And he says, I think the forward is actually a letter to her or something. It's addressed to her anyway. He says something to the effect of, "When I began writing this for you, it was perfect for your age. But now that I'm finishing it, you have grown up and you probably won't be too interested. But don't worry, someday you'll be old enough to enjoy fairy tales again." And that concept and that quote has always stuck out with me because I apply it to Star Wars. Like we all sort of got through our, you mentioned it, Daz, you grew up to a point where, maybe a little too cool for school, right? And that's okay. That's okay because you get to a point now where you're like, nope, I'm old enough to enjoy this stuff again. And I just love that concept. And I think sometimes I wonder if Caleb and Luke are sort of in that time frame where they still enjoy it, but they don't have that childhood wonder. And I just look forward to the day that they get that childhood wonder back, because now they're enjoying it because it's something we do as a family, something we talk about and record a podcast about, and we enjoy it. But it's not the same as when I would watch the 10 and the 8-year-old bouncing up and down during a Clone Wars episode, right? That's not going to happen to two 20-something-year-olds. But it may start again when they're in their 30s.
That is so true.
Right?
Yeah.
So I love hearing both of those stories. Let's have some fun real quick before we get into any Acolyte discussion. And I came across this on a thread actually a few months ago, and I did it with the boys not too long ago. I think it was during our Bad Batch discussions, and I would love to have your answers on record. So we're just going to go through real quick. Don't worry about any exposition on why or what. If you want to share it, feel free to share it. But I'm going to ask you some of your favorite things about Star Wars, and just go ahead and hit me with them. Okay, so we'll go. Frank, you go ahead. And then Daz, and then we'll go to the next category because you guys have heard my picks already. I won't bother you with them again. So let's go with the first thing is your favorite overall movie, Frank.
A New Hope.
A New Hope. Love it. Daz?
Force Awakens, because of the way it makes me feel.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Frank, you already answered this, but you can answer it again. What your favorite of the originals? A New Hope?
A New Hope.
A New Hope. And Daz?
Empire, masterpiece.
Yeah. Oh, Kent.
No wrong
Can you
answers.
go wrong with any of them? Like, really, can you go wrong with any of them?
You can't. It's impossible. It's the best quiz ever.
There's no wrong answers. Okay, how about your favorite of the prequels?
I'm going to say Revenge of the Sith, although most often goes on Attack of the Clones.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear why it goes back and forth.
I don't know. everyone seems to not like Attack of the Clones too much, and right enough, a lot of the romantic stuff is uncomfortable, a bit clunky. But there's a lot in it that I do enjoy. I love the Geonosis stuff, the arena, the rescue when all the Jedi come in on gunships. Um, there's just something about it that I can't put a finger on. Where if I'm wanting a Star Wars movie on just for it to be on, typically it's Episode 2, and I can give you
I
no
love it.
reason beyond that.
Quick story about my best friend. Unfortunately, who's no longer with us, but he was like he was my Anakin to my Obi-Wan in our Star Wars fandom, and he lived in Ohio. So it's funny, our friendship was always really based on sort of text messages. So it was, except for when we were young. That's when we met, when we were young. He moved away though. His name is Matt, and you'll hear me every once in a while mention something about Uncle Matt to the boys. Anyway, this is who I'm talking about. After the prequel trilogy was finished and Revenge of the Sith came out, I asked him, "So, what did you think about Revenge of the Sith?" And he goes, "It's just too sad. I didn't like it. It was too sad." And I go, "Well, I get it. Okay, I get it. It is very sad." I go, "So, which one was your favorite then?" And he goes, "Attack of the Clones." He goes, "Episode 2 is my favorite." And I go, "Why? What's your favorite about that?" And he goes, "The love story." He loves the love story, and he would admit to it being clunky and a little bit weird at times, but he loved the love story in Attack of the Clones. And I just love hearing what people love about why they love things. So at any rate,
That's fantastic.
Daz, how about you? Your favorite in the prequels?
Recency bias, perhaps, but at the moment, amazingly, it is the Phantom Menace. We've had this whole festival of the Phantom Menace recently, and it's made me appreciate it. I've always quite enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it was anywhere near my top film previously, but I've enjoyed this Phantom Menace period that we've had recently so much that at the moment I'm just glowing for it. So I'll say Phantom Menace.
I love that. I love it. I could go on about that too, but we're gonna power forward. Favorite of the sequels, Daz. You've already answered this, but Frank.
It's going to be The Last Jedi. I just, not to go on too much about this, something that I'd mentioned to Dan once in a message, in just a tweet, was about all of the prequels, the sequels, and I felt that, as we spoke earlier, The Force Awakens is really comfortable. The Last Jedi is challenging, and then I just get a lot of joy from The Rise of Skywalker, and I know that's not broadly the case, but when I look at the three, I always come back to Last Jedi because I like Star Wars most when it's challenging. And I don't think there's been much that has been more challenging that's made you engage your brain, not just look for spaceships and lightsabers. So
I agree with you. It is. I remember walking out of that's also my favorite. That is my favorite Star Wars movie and my favorite of the sequels. I remember walking out of the theater the first time I saw it and just sort of being weirdly contemplative, almost like I have to think about this. And I was with a group of friends. The boys were there. My friend Simbat was there. One of his friends was there. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to talk to anybody right now. I just want to think. I just want to
yeah,
think about what just happened. But in a really, really good way. So yeah, I love the way that you put that, is that it's a challenge, because it definitely is. But I agree also with you, Daz, about The Force Awakens. You mentioned that you like how it makes you feel. And you're right. Oh, what a blast it was when it came back. It just brought Star Wars back and all of its fun and adventure. Um, I still quote Finn uh, from lines from that movie so many times, like when he says about Chewie, "This thing's tried to kill me 7 times by now," or "Why does everyone want to go back to Jakku?" I just love how he says these things, and like, I don't speak that when he talks to BB-8. I don't speak that. There's so many things that just are so much fun about that movie. And then how can you beat the Falcon on that escape from Jakku? Like, that scene is just incredible, incredible. So I'm assuming, Daz, you're going to stick with that as your favorite of the sequels.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, so what has been your favorite project that has come to us in the Disney era? Whether it is, let's go crazy. If you want to talk about print, comics, anything, any Disney project era, Disney era project, what is your favorite?
mine's Andor. I've just actually rewatched it again. I'm massively looking forward to where that story takes us. I think just because of how raw it is, It's really relatable. There's not so many robots. There's not so many aliens. And I think that's by design. It's to make you feel like perhaps you could be in that world. You could be dropped in. Things are not too unfamiliar. And we've all seen, experienced, heard stories of oppression and people fighting for justice and such. And here we see it at the very beginning, but making um, huge strides in starting a momentum that's going to carry that through to the very end and seeing the end of the empire. So Andor was my top one by quite some margin.
Also a very challenging project as well. There's a
Truly is.
lot of topics and ideas that are not easy to wrap your head around. Daz, how about you?
I'm going to say the Kenobi series. It was something that I never thought would happen. Hayden, Ewan on the screen together, Star Wars, Christmas Star Wars.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's the gift that keeps on giving, because you can just come back and
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I always when I think about Kenobi, I think first about that final fight between Vader and Kenobi, and just how chillingly powerful Hayden Christensen's delivery of the dialogue in that scene, especially when he gets his mask split and you actually see his face and you hear just the most haunting voice of Hayden and Vader at the same time. It's just a marvel. It's just a feat. It's incredible. But it's easy to think about that. But then you think about the phenomenon that was Leia. We never expected, no one really knew what this story was going to be about. We knew it was going to be about Kenobi, but what they did with Leia and Kenobi was just, it moved me. I got emotional. I welled up with tears, in that, final episode. And she, oh my gosh, just so charming and amazing, and so unexpected and so great. Yeah, so great picks on both. The next one was going to be favorite show, but you guys both answered that already with your favorite project. I will add that my favorite show so far has been The Bad Batch, just because I love the character development, the sophistication of that show, that the animation has just become sort of something of perfection. I just love so much about that. And it also sort of coincided with sort of my further involvement in the community with Star Wars. We did Bad Batch season 2. I got, that was a big selling point at Celebration Anaheim, where we all got to meet for the first time. So Bad Batch has a special place in my heart, and I really, really hope that we get to see some more of those characters in the future. Okay, how about your favorite droid, Frank?
Oh, okay. Always been R5D4. And I think that goes back to the original, as it was in Britain, Palatoy figure. I loved it. Seeing him come back in Mandalorian, and in the Certain Point of View story. I just got the re-upped Black series a couple of months ago. So yeah, R5D4 is an odd one because there's not a lot of meat on that bone, but it's nice to have seen him again recently. Drumming up a little courage.
What a great example of Star Wars creators and storytellers being able to find meat on the bone, right?
Right, exactly.
And
right.
Still use this droid. How about you, Des?
That's such a good pick, Frank. I'm going to say BB-8. I came along with that sort of first trailer. I think maybe the first trailer for Force Awakens, and he's shooting through the sand of Jakku, and amazing design as well. Like I think we sort of take him for granted now, whereas like when he first popped up on the screen and he's that sort of spherical shape, it's a clever design as well. It looks awesome.
I remember seeing him in that trailer that you're talking about, and yeah, they just show him. He's just like booking it, right? And he's at top speed. He's just going, and thinking to myself, what? And that's all they gave us, was just that one image. And then I believe it was Celebration. I don't know which celebration it was after, but it was a celebration that followed that trailer, and they rolled him out on stage. And because in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is digital. This is so cool, but it's not real. It's just a Jar Jar situation, an incredibly rendered digital character. But then they rolled him out on stage, and I'm thinking, what is happening right now? This is not only one of the things I love most about Star Wars is not just the stories and everything that we sit here talking endlessly about, but the innovation behind it, because it's been in the DNA from the beginning. It has changed the world as it's come out, and that's one of the reasons I love the volume, and that's one of the reasons why I love BB-8, because it's just another thing that they pushed forward. I even nerded out on that thing that that food that Ray pours in, and when she's going back to live in her downed at her walker, and she just sort of pours in, and it just sort of puffs up, and I'm like, what am I seeing right now? And then to realize that that was designed and it was an actual thing in camera that they did and not a digital effect. Of course, nobody wanted to eat it because it doesn't taste good, but it's still something that happened. And I'm like, oh, I love Star Wars so much. This is amazing. My favorite droid is R2. I just love R2 because he's sassy. Okay, how about your favorite Jedi, Frank?
Whoa, I've got to flip a coin on this one.
Yeah, what day is it, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, and I'm gonna have to go with Obi-Wan. I'm split between him and Ahsoka, but I suppose you could argue she's no longer a Jedi. I mean, that's splitting hairs, I think. But Obi-Wan, again, like you said with the series, how that expanded on what we know of that character, and how he's appeared in games as well. I've loved hearing the distress call that he put out. It pops up in Rebels. It pops up in Jedi Fallen Order. So Obi-Wan Kenobi's going to be my pick.
You're not going to hear any argument from me. I'm famously on record as saying I can't commit, so I just say Luke Soka Kenobi is my my favorite. Daz, how about you?
This is an easy one for me because my top character of all is Rey, so she falls into this category. So it's Rey, just incredible story, such a good character, funny, can be serious, just brilliant.
In a word, she is brilliant. Daisy Ridley is brilliant as well. How exciting was it for you to be in that theater when recently when her dog and pony show, right? Because she's a mega star, so when she shows up, a lot of other people show up too. But you got to see, what was a Q&A, right, with her when you went to see that film?
I did. I was so lucky. I managed to get tickets, and I just camped out there all day to get a good seat. I managed to get on the front row, and it was one of those things that I'll remember forever. It was a huge moment for me after being such a big fan for so long, and she was everything I hoped she'd be. She was engaging, funny, it's bright, and I managed to quickly sneak in a few words with her at the end as well, which just, oh, come on, unbelievable. I was like, okay, I'm done. It doesn't get any better than that. It was amazing.
You've reached the top of the mountain.
I have. It's amazing. I can just relax from here on out.
Well, and now to be able to look forward to the Rey-centric movie that's going to be coming down the road at some point. And in my mind, she sort of represents where the franchise is going, because we get a lot of where it's been. And Frank, you mentioned it, how they fill in gaps, and we all love that. We want to know more, and we're actually here to talk about. We're doing a very poor job of it, but talk about a big sort of a new era and filling in the gaps. But Rey represents sort of, in my mind, where we're going to be going, and I love that. I'm always interested to see where something new going forward in the process. So, okay, how about your favorite Sith?
Palpatine. Palpatine always has been, and I have no good reason for him apart from his singular focus, what he's driving for, and his preparedness for everything. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Because of everything he does is for the worst reasons. But
he's a really good planner.
When it comes to being organized, there's no one like him.
No, there really isn't.
He's probably got staples to count his Post-its and tabs.
It'll be really interesting too to see, and we may circle back on this when we get to the Acolyte, because we will get to the Acolyte. If you're listening to this episode to listen to us talk about the Acolyte, we're going to get there. Don't worry, we'll get there. We're just going to have a little fun getting there. So I think Palpatine may come up again in the context of Acolyte. We'll see. But Daz, how about you? Favorite Sith?
I'm going to say Vader. The more we've got to know Anakin, the more I've enjoyed Vader. So Vader.
Yeah, and this new era of storytelling and Hayden being involved, I feel like has added a layer of context that is very rich. And I was a little afraid of it to begin with, but I'm enjoying as we get more and more of it. So, okay, cool. How about your favorite ship?
I'm scared to say this because every ship I like, they blow up. They started with the Razor Crest. They took out the Marauder. Fortunately, my favourite ship is the one that goes down every time. That's Y-wings in general. I've always liked Y-wings since I first saw them. There's some other
Love it.
great options, but just as a generic, I love the bombers. They're fabulous.
Yeah, such a cool design. How about you, Des?
I'm going to say X-wing, and if I have to pick one, I'll probably Poe Dameron's.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, it's so unique. Yeah, the black
The
color,
color scheme,
orange flashes.
the color scheme
Yeah,
too. I love that. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Uh, I'm going with something a little bit more sleek, but it's sort of X-wing-ish, and that's the Mando's in One Starfighter. I just was so thrilled when they came up with that thing. Oh, just love it. Okay, how about your favorite planet?
Coruscant. I like the city
Oh, cool.
and the planet. It's just one big city. Appeals to me greatly. So yeah, no question.
Coruscant is cool. What a cool concept too. It's an incredible concept. How about you, Des?
Yeah, I agree with that. But if I had to go to one, it's going to be Scarif. Looks good for a vacation.
That's mine too.
There
That's
we go.
exactly why I picked it. The beach everywhere. The beach.
Pre-destruction in brackets.
Yes. So hopefully, maybe pre-Empire at all before they built all this.
It would be better. You don't want those shore troopers wandering by as you're sunbathing.
Could you imagine? Okay, and what about your last question? I've really enjoyed hearing this, but it does have to come to an end, unfortunately. Least favorite planet?
Dagobah. It's got to be. It looks horrid. It's so humid and stinky. It's just mud and slime. I mean, this slimy mud hole. I'm sorry, Yoda. It's a slimy mud hole, and I don't want to go there.
I think that's why Yoda. People ask like, why did Yoda decide to go there? Because he knows no one in the entire, not just galaxy, but universe probably, and in all of existence, probably doesn't want to go to Dagobah. So that's the safest place he was going. How about you, Daz?
I kind of mean this, but don't mean it. And I'm going to say Tatooine only because it keeps popping up everywhere. And although it doesn't bother me so much, it seems to bother a lot of other people, and I'm tired of hearing them talk about it.
Yeah, stop going to Tatooine because I'm tired of hearing people complain.
Yeah, 100%. That's what it is.
I'm there with you. That's great. Plus, you think about that line that I just said from Finn. Why does everybody want to keep going back to Tatooine? So there's only so much water you can squeeze out of that rock. Boom. Fantastic. That was a blast. I love that. And I'm going to develop that list as a getting to know you, but just open it up to other things too, like movies and music and all that kind of stuff, because I just think it's a fun way just to answer some easy questions that teach people about who we are. So thanks for joining me while doing that. All right, so let's get into the Acolyte. This is a show that is going to take place at the end of, or the waning days, decades of the High Republic. So I, unfortunately, have not had enough time in my life to consume the High Republic initiative work. So I'm really going into this show and this era very, very, very much with blinders on, and I'm going to learn as I go. What about you guys? And it's not to say don't get me wrong. It's not because I don't think it's any good. I think that what they're doing is magnificent, and I'm so happy that they have done this, developed this era, which no one as a Star Wars fan, at least in the current canon, knows anything about. So I'm all for it. And I love the fact that they've done it through literature, comic books, that format. I just don't, unfortunately, have enough time to consume it, which maybe someday I will. I can retroactively enjoy all this. What about you guys? Are you High Republic readers? Are you up on the era? Have you been following along as this initiative has played itself out, Frank?
Yeah, so I did go through all of Phase 1. Like you, kind of started to run out of time when Phase 2 kicked off. So I think the last book that I actually listened to, because the long commutes to work and back give me the opportunity to listen to audiobooks, which are always wonderful to listen to. Mark Thompson does a great job with the various voices and delivering that story. So the last novel that I'd listened to on my commutes was Convergence. Phase 3, as it's happening now, I've not had any exposure to whatsoever. What had me kind of step back a little bit from it was it sounded like they were going to be choppy with the timeline. So where you had a very chronological Phase 1 into Phase 2, this one was going to be some of it was before Light of the Jedi, some were going to be in between or parallel to, and it started to get a little confusing for me. So I stepped away a little bit. But it was an interesting choice by them as well. I'm guessing what they must have wanted to do is to, like we were saying earlier about filling gaps. There may have been chunks of time where some more information or this was going along parallel to this other event was going to be important, and that may have been already from that time ago that they started talking about those scenarios, already looking forward to the Acolyte. What I'm particularly looking forward to this is it's towards the end of the High Republic. So this really is, as far as I can tell, a blank slate. So like you, what's coming ahead, I've got very little to play with in coming up with what we might see. And that's always very exciting that it's all going to be brand new and totally fresh.
Frank, that's interesting that you brought up the choppiness of the time frame in Phase 3. Like I said, I haven't been following along, and reading as we go, but I do follow from a distance and sort of listen to the conversation, and I wasn't aware that was happening. And I know that was one of the things people were really enjoying about the first couple phases was how linear the story was, and it's just this one big long story going forward. So I wasn't aware that was happening in the third phase. Daz, how about you? Have you been reading along, or where does this fit in for you?
I have been reading along, but I came to it very late. I've heard a lot of people say this, and I definitely felt that I was really intimidated by the High Republic when it first came out. There was an avalanche of material, books, and all different sort of age groups, I guess, that they were aimed for, and I at the time I didn't feel like I knew where to start. I could see all these titles coming out, and they all sounded really exciting, but I wasn't sure really how to approach it. But it probably was when I started thinking really about the Acolyte that I thought, oh, maybe I should get on this. And
oh, cool!
I decided to focus just purely on the sort of I don't know, we call them the sort of adult novels, and I've used audiobooks for those as well. Just super handy for me. When I'm busy, I've always got my headphones on, and I'm listening to something. If it's not a pod, then it's usually an audiobook, and so it's been nice to get through them. The Phase 1, which I guess they would call the sort of main timeline, the main period where the High Republic is set, was fantastic, and that was through the first phase. The second phase was really jarring because they sort of went down like the prequel route, where they sort of, I don't know how far back, but it was probably within the hundreds of years previous to the Phase 1. And I remember being a bit disappointed when I started listening to those, thinking that these characters that I've really been getting into in Phase 1 suddenly vanished, and without really sort of satisfying finish. Now in Phase 3, we're returning to those, and it's taken me a bit of time to pick them up again. As much as I liked them the first time, I've been committed to Phase 2 and got through those books, and I'm back up to speed now, and I've enjoyed it all. It's a lot. I think that probably just sort of picking a certain area that you want to hit, and they have been very good in the way they've written them, that you don't necessarily have to rely on having maybe read the comics or sort of maybe the sort of the younger books. As you'd expect, they've done a great job. The story's good, and it's an interesting period.
What an incredible concept for a project, though, because as you guys, you both are way more well versed in it than I am. Full disclosure, I did buy Light of the Republic because at some point in my brain I said, yes, I can consume this. I can definitely do this along with everything else I do. So I bought Light of the Republic, and I sort of I started reading the book. I've started the book 3 times, and I have stopped 3 times. Not because I haven't enjoyed it. I did enjoy it, but I quickly realized, oh no, this isn't actually something I can enjoy the way I want to enjoy while I got all these other plates spinning right now. So this will be something I will get to definitely down the road, but I will enjoy it retroactively rather than along with. But one of the things that I'm hearing you guys say is that how versatile it is. It sounds like you can really pick up and choose what you want to enjoy. Daz, as you mentioned, you are reading one specific type of
Mm.
media. Frank, you enjoyed it through phase one, uh, fell out at phase two, but it's still there, right? If you wanted to read every single word on every single page, you could do that. Or if you just wanted to go with the comics, you could do that. If you wanted to go with just the young adult novels, and what a brilliant concept for a project! Like, if you want to have this big, expansive galaxy full of stories, I really think Star Wars has always done it very well from the beginning. Even if you don't consider Legends as canon anymore, which we don't, it still was a good model of like, look at the immensity of this galaxy and all these stories that we can tell. And Disney has just sort of put their spin on it with the various ways that they do this, and I think it's brilliant. I think it's just great. And as a fan, you never ever have a loss for something to consume. Yeah, Frank, go ahead.
Just a quick like side note to what you're saying there. From the days of Product Luminous, right before it was called the High Republic, and we would see those little videos, and they were doing the authors were going around doing like little meet and greets and talks about some of what was going on. The characters are fantastic. I mean, they've done a really good job of character design. Especially what I liked most was the explanation of how different Jedi experience the Force. Avar, Chris, Daz having said, like the Jedi, she hears the Force as almost music, and there's in the Great Disaster when they're trying to work out what on earth's going on, she's listening to the Force, she's meditating, listening to the Force, and she's hearing what she perceives as being a note missing. It's like
Oh wow.
something's off. So now, what I don't want to do, because we've got a character coming up in Acolyte from the High Republic that I'm super excited to find out about, who quite late on in phase one reveals has a specific, it's not necessarily a connection to the Force, but a sensitivity to the Force. So I'm gonna play that card real close to my chest because I don't know if it's going to come up in the Acolyte at all. But if you should get
Mm.
back into, or you get on that High Republic train, even afterwards, I think you might see what I'm alluding to, and I know it's kind of not very good to be hearing because it's like, what are you talking about? But but those the most they're up to that point in the stories in the novels, because I did hear that the novels are all you really need, and all of the other young adult and the young reader ones are very much again, they're just additional to, they give little textures to the story, but you can get it all from
Sure.
just the novels. So the character design is beautifully done.
Well, that's a perfect segue to another question that I had that I'd love to hear what you guys have to say is what is are there any characters or elements, because we can make it very broad that way, any characters or elements, aspects of the High Republic that you are most excited about to come up in the Acolyte? So, Frank, you're mentioning this character. I think I know who you're talking about, because Disney and Lucasfilm are doing a great job at getting these characters in front of us right now. Almost to the point where I have actually taken a step back. I don't want to see it. I want to go in as this. I haven't seen it like this for any other project so far, because to me this is like Marvel level of saturation with the
Mhm.
Acolyte, and I'm fine. It's fine with me, but you need to do that. I'm good with it, but I want less than that when I go into watching a TV show or a movie. So I see a lot of things, but I don't dive into it. I've been very specific with what I've actually wanted to consume, but what I do see is that they're getting the characters out in front of us. And one of those characters, I think the one that you're alluding to, is Vernestra Rowe, right?
Mhm. Yes,
from the
that's
High
right.
Republic.
That's right. Yeah.
So I've seen her out there. I know nothing about her. I think that the design of this character looks amazing, and I've seen that she's had a very long story because I've seen some pictures from comics where she seems very young and then a little bit older, and then clearly this is going to be the oldest version we've seen of her just because of the time frame. So you spoke about Vernestra Rowe, but Daz, Frank as well, weigh in on this. We'll have Daz get a chance to go first here, but um, are there any other characters or any other High Republic aspects that you're most looking forward to, or something that you're hoping to see in the upcoming show?
Um, well, generally, and for anybody who's not been exposed to any of the High Republic books or anything, it, I think the High Republic started about 500 years before the prequels. So we've got like a 500 year window between the High Republic roughly beginning and where we end up at the beginning of the prequels. And the Jedi are in a very different place during the High Republic. They are they're really at the top of their game. It's shown just from their appearance. They have sort of almost ceremonial gold and white Jedi clothes, which they wear when they're sort of around the temple and places like that, which I think sort of much more sort of in your face of that kind of these are beacons of hope as, in the form of people, and so they're doing really well during the High Republic. Which is we perhaps see a little bit in the Phantom Menace and going into the prequel, but I think the cracks are starting to show by then, and they're already maybe on something of a decline. So I am excited to see the Jedi really at what is perhaps considered their most powerful. I listening around to some of the interviews that are going around, nothing spoilery or anything like that. But what is reassuring is that I have heard that you don't have to have read any High Republic to enjoy the Acolyte. I don't think that, in particular, any of the storylines that we've read about in the High Republic will really come into play in any meaningful way in the Acolyte, which we want these shows to do really well. So that's really reassuring to me that they're saying that. I think a lot of the sort of High Republic enjoyment in it will be more the aesthetic, perhaps where they're at. I think that there's probably I think about 100-year gap between the stories of the High Republic and the Acolyte. So there's not going to human characters. We wouldn't expect to be seeing any of those. It'll be the species that live longer. So perhaps we can expect to see maybe a Yoda, a Yaddle, or a bit out there. Dexter Jester's a long-living species. I don't think he'll pop up, but it is possible. So, what I'm most excited about, almost from the sort of High Republic into the Acolyte period, is the fact that there's no constraints from the Skywalker the period, and almost anything is on the table, which is really exciting. Nobody's going into watching the Acolyte wanting a specific thing to happen to a specific character. We're all going into this with a beautiful, clean slate. It's which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the beauties of this, not just the show, but the whole, like we said about the High Republic idea, is that you go in not knowing anything. And of course, you have this, in the original trilogy and even the sequel trilogy, well, I guess all three trilogies, you have this 900-year-old character, Yoda, that could literally be in anything that would be 1,000 years old ish, right? So yeah, could he pop up? And one of the things, actually, I'm gonna save my thoughts on Leslie Headland, the basically the brain behind this show. I want to talk about her, but Frank, I want to give you an opportunity. Was there anything besides, you mentioned Vernestra Rowe, um, anything else that you would like to add on to something, like what Daz was saying, something that you're looking forward to seeing or experiencing this show through characters or elements?
Yeah, there's one thing that's pretty surface, to be honest, and that's just a love of the ship designs to me. In the High
Mm,
Republic, the Jedi use fighters called vectors. Um, we may have seen recently
right.
Greg Cass's little ones have the Young Jedi Adventures, the little toy vector.
Yeah.
The way they're described in movement, how maneuverable they are, and how the Jedi pilot them is amazing. Um, I'd also like to see long beams. I'd love to see some of those ships that have been described and we've seen in comics. I'm not a big comic guy, but I've seen cartoon renders of some of these ships. I'd love to see some of those. Um, it does feel like Daz was saying, where there's a chunk of time passed. I think things like the Nile are not going to be relevant to the story. I do
Hmm.
like this going to be a mystery. I've wanted a Star Wars mystery for a long time. I remember
Yeah.
when 1313, the game was spoken about, then scrapped. I can't remember. I was speaking to someone about. I would love to have had like a CSI Coruscant, something where there's somebody investigating some kind of a crime, and it's not Coruscant as far as we can tell, or although some of it will be because we've seen the Jedi Temple in some of the trailers. But this is what I've been craving for a long time, and going into it very blind. They've done a really good job, even that extended like little reel that was at the end of the re-release of Phantom Menace. They're not really showing you a lot. It was just a really adrenaline-filled fight between two characters. So they've left a lot to the imagination at this point, and I have no idea where to begin with what this story will be.
Even going back like to the Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan Kenobi investigation, right? Detective Kenobi. Uh,
Yes.
it's always fun to have that mystery type of thing in Star Wars. And one of the things that I was always wondering, could Star Wars accomplish this, is sort of taking different elements from different types of movies, uh, genres to be specific, and could they incorporate that into Star Wars? And the answer to that was a resounding yes, because of Andor, in my opinion, because that takes a very specific type of storytelling in there, telling it. It's like a political thriller, right? Or in Star Wars, and it worked so well. This is sort of another dip of the toe in there, right? Where we're talking about a mystery, potentially a mystery thriller, right? Because of some of what we've seen, some of it looks absolutely thrilling and very suspenseful, if I may even say that. So it'll be an interesting dynamic to see how that works into the show as well, not just all the stuff that we're having fun with like, oh, we're going to get to see Jedi. One of the things that I was really enamored with in the one of the trailers was when they showed all the Jedi ignite their lightsabers, and they're facing off against some kind of a dark being. We don't know what to call it yet, right? But they all ignite their lightsabers, and you just see yellow and blue and purple and green. It took me back to, Daz, you mentioned it, I believe, when we were talking about the Attack of the Clones, or, in that arena scene where they're all fighting. And I remember seeing that in the trailer and thinking, I've never seen so many lightsabers on the screen before in my life. Even in the Phantom Menace, we had two Jedi facing off against one Sith with Maul and his double bladed, right? But here is another example of, we've got dozens of Jedi and they're all igniting their lightsabers at the same time. What brought that on? How is that going to work, and how is that going to work on the screen? I can't wait to see that. It's really, 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 the potential there is amazing. I mentioned Leslie Headland, and did either one of you guys watch her show on Netflix? It was called Russian Dolls.
I
I
did
did not.
not. I saw that Ryan Johnson gave it great praise, but I have not watched it. No.
I do believe there's two seasons. I watched the first season, and just because of time, I haven't watched the second. But the first season was remarkably entertaining and incredibly creative. And it takes a very familiar trope and it just puts a new spin on it, which is sort of the Groundhog Day trope, where it's the same day going over and over and over again. And the main character, um, there's no spoiler. It happens in the first. I mean, it sets up the story. Uh, she dies at the end of every day and starts again where she began. So, same type of Groundhog Day, but it's much more than that. It's mysterious. It's thrilling. It's fun. It's funny, and it ended up having a very, very nice message, a very good message, something that paid off at the end. So when they announced that the maker of that show was going to have a Star Wars show, if I could have done this, I would have done a backflip, because I was over the moon, super happy about this creative storyteller getting a crack at Star Wars. And here we are now. When this episode drops, it's going to be Monday. Maybe people are going to be listening to us talk about the Acolyte while they're waiting to try to get into the free screenings, because you got to show up like 3 hours beforehand to get a seat. But it's now here. Seems like we've been waiting for it for the longest time. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of the interviews that she's been talking about in the press events leading up to this, and she's not only got the amazing pedigree of what she's done before, but she's also a huge Star Wars fan. I believe that she's read a lot of the sort of the old novels, extended universe, and I believe you don't have to be a Star Wars fan to come into Star Wars and make a new story. I think it's important that you just come with a good story. There's plenty of people at Lucasfilm who can make sure it's Star Wars. What we really want is a great story. If we see something that's Star Wars with a bad story, it's not going to last the test of time. But she seems so. She's really emotionally connected with the work she's done. I've heard that she's got quite emotional at some of the events, and I think she's really hoping that it's going to land for people, and it's so encouraging to hear that she's not sort of trying to be cool or blasé about it at all. You could tell she's put her heart and soul into this, and I think it'll probably show.
One of the things that she has mentioned, there's a couple things. The first thing is very recent. I believe you mentioned that interview with Dave Filoni. She may have said it in that interview, but she went out of her way to speak about whatever you think this show is, it's not. And I just love that idea, because it just subverts all of our expectations. And that's one of my favorite things about The Last Jedi, going back to that discussion. In the trailer, they literally told us, they had Luke Skywalker telling us, this is not going to go the way that you think. And here we have another example. She's telling people, listen, whatever you think this is not, it's not it. So that means they've got something that they're, number one, proud of, but also confident about. And that makes me excited as a fan, not even just a Star Wars fan, but a fan. And the other thing was that you mentioned it, Daz. She has consumed a lot of different kinds of Star Wars. I've read in a previous interview that came out, seems like months ago now. She talked about how she took influences from the Clone Wars, the animated series, how she's taken inspiration from video games. And I can't wait to see how that works its way onto the screen, especially being a property or a show that's taking place before all of those things. She just seems like she's a Star Wars encyclopedia, and that makes me very excited too, just seeing how she's going to turn that into a show. And here we are. I mean, it's here. What is the last thing I have for you guys? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. What is your hype level? Because I know in our community, we're very good at managing expectations. I feel like that's sort of like, if we had a t-shirt as a community, just everybody that we sort of talk to and listen to, I think it should say something like, we manage expectations very well. Maybe not the most catchy phrase, but it's so true. I don't think there's anybody that I really consume Star Wars with that goes out there and speculates irresponsibly and then gnashes their teeth when they don't get I don't know anyone like that. And I love that. It's part of one of the best parts of this, how I consume and the people that I hear and we all listen to. So knowing that, where are you guys at with this? What's your hype level?
Mine's very high. Like I mentioned a moment ago, I love a mystery. Some of my favorite Star Wars characters have very murky backgrounds. You're not really sure where they've come from, where they're heading to. They say several trailers in, and I'm just waiting here to be presented with a new story. And I like the way you said it just now about managing expectations, because Some people do get upset if the story, as you said, like Luke said, doesn't go their way. They get really upset about it. I always think of it as a gift, especially with someone like Leslie Headland, who's put a lot of time and emotion and effort into it. What Daz was alluding to just there, I think I saw one of the streaming Star Wars live stage interviews with Leslie Headland, and she'd said that Star Wars saved her life. I'm not exactly sure what she meant by that, but it's clear that it all means a great deal to her. So for that level of dedication and passion be sent our way, I'm ready for it.
I love that. I love the fact that you brought that up, and because it not only, sometimes you think like, do I take this too seriously? This is Star Wars. Am I getting, do I, you got to manage, you got to make sure that your priorities are in the right place. And when you hear someone say something that important, then like, you know what, I relate to that, and that's okay. And that's good, because in a lot of ways it has refreshed parts of my life. And to hear that it's meant that much to someone is so it's very endearing, and it's almost empowering. It's sort of a weird dynamic that I have in my brain right now, but it's great. Daz, how about you? Where's your expectation level with this one, or your hype level?
Oh, my hype level couldn't be any higher for this. I'm not going into it hoping for any story in particular. I think that at the end of this, I'm hoping that we've gone week to week wondering what's going to happen. I think it's going to be one of those. I think there's the discussion in between these weekly episodes, once the first two are out of the way, is going to be such a good time. We have no point of reference with anything else that's going on at this period to say, oh, well, this could happen, that can't happen. That's going to be so nice. It's a complete open world ahead of us. Once it finishes, what I really would like is for us to have some new characters that we've fallen in love with, that we want to hear more stories and see more of. Because if that's where we're at, then it must have been a good experience. And I think that this is the first live action outside of the Skywalker period, and it's a huge opportunity, and I'm sure they're feeling that pressure, because this could lead anywhere, and we mustn't be guilty of putting too much pressure on them. But what I hope for is some amazing characters, is people we want to see on the screen more, and it looks like we're going to be treated to some really different kinds of characters, and that's going to be so interesting to see. We're going to see our first live action Wookiee Jedi that has popped up on the trailer. That's going to be incredible. How's that going to work? How's that going to look? We've read about it, and we've seen Gunji in the animation, but this looks like a completely different kind of character. We've got some amazing actors in this. Carrie-Anne Moss from the most famous, possibly, for The Matrix, with the incredible kung fu fighting. Just the sort of flashbacks to when they completely broke the movie world with the work they were doing on those Matrix movies. How's that going to be? Daphne Keane, a younger actress. She was in the Logan movie as the young character in that. Since then, I've seen her in His Dark Materials, and she was fabulous in that. And she's just going from strength to strength. I'm just excited to see what she does. And I could go on and on with them. It's just so exciting.
Well, I do have a very important question. Daz, when are you getting your podcast? Because I'm telling you right now, what you just said was like, you just ticked all my boxes, like everything. And I thank you for that, because now you don't have to listen to me say it. It's much better hearing you say that. The choreography and all I was going to bring up Carrie-Anne Moss too, and then Kelnaka, right? That's the Jedi Wookiee. But yeah, I mean, come on, you've got your headset. You clearly can record things, so come on, get it out there. We need to hear you talk about the Acolyte.
you guys are doing too good a job for me to get in on that action. I'm just happy to guess. That'll keep me more than happy.
I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun and a lot less work just to be the guest.
We're the
I
cheer
can
line.
believe it.
Daz, me, everyone else. We're just the cheer line. We'll keep on cheering you along.
100%.
Well,
That's it.
honestly, and I mean it. I really mean it. Everything that you just said was on my list of what I'm looking forward to too. So thank you for saving all the listeners from having to hear me say it again. But yeah, that's all I got about this show. And listen, I'm just happy that the next time I'm going to be sitting in front of my microphone talking, it's going to be about this show. And I'm looking forward to, like you guys said, the weekly discussion, the conversation, how we're going to chew all this up and just make this wonderful dialogue in Star Wars fandom for the next, whatever it's going to be, 7 weeks, I think, right? There's 8 episodes, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll get the first 2, and we'll have a solid 7 weeks of Star Wars to talk about. And just going back to the community aspect of it, kicking it off with you guys has been a thrill. Now going forward, getting the opportunity to talk to Caleb and Luke about this is going to be something I'm looking forward to. And then listening to everyone else out there, like the Gregs on Rebel Base Card, and Dan, of course. And you mentioned the Cantina cast, as you mentioned, I believe, before we started recording, that you have had the opportunity, and the guys at Star Wars Reactions, all these wonderful people, and not just wonderful podcasts, but wonderful people that share wonderful things about this thing that we love so much. That's probably my favorite part about a new Star Wars thing coming out, is just being able to enjoy it with all the fans. Are there any final thoughts, anything you guys want to say before we call this an episode that we didn't get to before we sign off?
Not really. I'm just curious about how many people this might be the Star Wars access point for. We always talk about access points. Whatever story was being told, whatever series was on TV, whatever movie was in the cinema. What new friends will we have in the future because of this show? The community
Great
keeps
point.
on expanding and getting better and better. So
Yeah.
I look forward to meeting those people.
That's a great point, because it is right there. Daz, you mentioned it being intimidated where to jump in for the High Republic. Maybe this is where somebody can jump in. This is a perfect spot, because you don't really need that backstory. You can come into what a great point, Frank. Thank you. Daz, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered it all, really. I'm, like you say, I'm so excited to see it. I'm so excited to talk about it with all of you guys, and we're just going to have a great time.
We sure are, and that's what it boils down to. I just love that. We're just going to have a great time. Well, perfect. Excellent. Well, so the last order of business then. Always love to give you guys an opportunity to shout out where you can be reached on the internet. Anything. Frank, you and Amy do Star Wars Rocks, which I just have to mention because you guys were here in Los Angeles just a matter of a month or so ago before, and we had an opportunity to sit down and have a wonderful afternoon. And you gifted me with one of the most magnificent things I've gotten, and that was a custom Colby cast Star Wars rock. And I tell you, it's sitting right behind me over here on my Ahsoka lightsaber display case. And I just tell you, I just love that, and I've loved the concept of your Star Wars rocks from the beginning. So please work that into what you're going to say to people to say hello and reach out to you on the internet.
Absolutely, and thank you for mentioning that. It was an absolute honor to do that. It's great to have such good friends, and to be able to just put a little something in your hand was a real privilege for both of us here. So yeah, that account. It's just if we're out and about, if we're going on vacation somewhere, or as an event, a con, just traveling around the country. Even we'll paint some rocks, typically Star Wars themed, and we'll leave those around. Sometimes we find out where they go, sometimes not. They're out there in the galaxy somewhere, and that's all we want to do. Is maybe it's a little light in someone's day. So that account is on Instagram, and that's at SWRocks. That's ROX 77. I'm on Instagram, Hive, and Threads at Mr. Daft Braun.
And you are a fantastic voice in that community, always positive, always uplifting. and one of the best people out there. So if there's anyone listening to this podcast, which I highly doubt there is, that has not followed Mr. Daft Prawn on some of the socials, and those socials, just go out there. You won't be sorry. I'm sure that everybody listening is already there, though. So I appreciate your time, Frank. Thank you so much for coming on. I always value hearing what you have to say, and thank you. I appreciate your friendship and appreciate your time. Daz, how about you, sir? Where can people reach out if they want to say hi to you on the socials?
Well, I can echo that. I was so happy when I heard that Frank was going to be on tonight as well. He's just an absolute legend, an absolute gentleman. So it's been so nice to chat. If anybody wants to find me, I'm on Instagram, X, and Threads is at Daz Davies 1. I'm always happy to hear from people. So if anybody wants to send me a message, go for it. And finally, Colby, I just want to say as well, thank you so much for having me on. It's meant a lot, and I could speak Star Wars with you all day. You guys, like, you're lucky that eventually the battery's going to run out on the computer.
That's why you got to plug that in, buddy. Just plug in that cord. Well, it has been a thrill, Daz. I mentioned to you this before we started recording, but I'll say it here too. I've been wanting to invite you to be a part of the show for the longest time, and I also was sort of hoping that I could be your podcasting debut, but Greg McLaughlin, man, he stole that thunder from me. And if he wasn't such a nice guy, I wouldn't forgive him, but he's a great guy. So I'm happy that you are now starting to be not just vocal on the socials, but now you're being vocal on podcasts. And I tell you, you're a natural. So go out there. If you decide that you want to chew up a lot of your spare time, make yourself a podcast, because I'll listen. But yeah, and since then you mentioned that you were talking to the Star Wars Reactions guys, and that's fantastic, and the Cantina Cast, and here we are now on the Colby Cast. So just one more notch in your belt, and I hope that belt gets full of notches, because you are a voice that I would love to hear more of. What you bring to the fandom, you just sort of all in line with what we're talking about, just that positive, uplifting perspective. And I mean it in all sincerity for both of you guys. It's just an honor to have a relationship and a friendship with both of you. Daz, I remember meeting you very briefly during Star Wars Celebration. Caleb and I were walking around the show floor with Tom, and we just sort of crossed paths, and Tom was just like, Daz! And it was like a high school reunion real quick, like big hugs. And just from that point, it was just a really wonderful exchange, and getting to know you through the socials has just been a joy. And now to have you on the show has just been a pleasure, a great pleasure. So thank you both for coming on. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of the Colby Cast. So for Franc Mulder and for Daz Davies, this is Colby reminding you, in an age of light, a darkness rises. You can find the Colby Cast on Twitter and Instagram at the Colby Cast. If you're wordy, like me, you can send an email to thecolbycast@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review on your favorite podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is not endorsed by anyone or anything for that matter. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of the Colby Cast, unless otherwise indicated.
That'll do, Donkey. That'll do.